Hello and welcome to a new video on the Think Design Work Smart channel in the series Agile Challenges. This will be a bit of a different type of video because something really cool happened in the past few days. Rebecca Worsbrook in the QuickFest conference shared a few of our practices, and I know that she has shared these practices before. And I think it's a good idea to give you a bit more context if you're interested in the team agreements that you can see there. So this is what she shared. She shared working agreements on Mozaic Works. This is actually an older list that we used in the past with our development team. But it's also a technique that we have been using with clients. I'd like to explain a bit more about what the working agreements are and what is their goal. The main goal of working agreements is to ensure a good self-organizing team. Whenever you have a group of people that turn into a team, you realize that they have different preferences. For example, some people may find that it's okay to be 5 minutes late to a meeting, while other people will be very annoyed if you are late just 1 minute or just a few seconds if it doesn't start at precisely the time when it is set. Other type of difference is that perhaps some people feel that it's okay to argue vehemently when discussing various problems, while other people need more time to think, reflect, and come back with ideas. And whenever you have a varied group of people, which is key if you want to have a good cross-functional team in a XP or in a Scrum team, you also need to have some kind of rules that apply to a micro society that builds there. So whenever you have a cross-functional, self-organized team, you need to have, you are basically building a micro society, and this society needs to grow, find its own rules for functioning. Much like a society in the large has laws that you can pass, it has a certain culture. These are things that you need to translate to this micro society that is building. This allows people to know that they are in a place where they can all contribute and in a place where they can basically discuss openly various things. And so this is the fundamental idea behind working agreements. Working agreements are these sets of rules that you define as a team, inside of a team, and that help you facilitate and basically smooth the way you collaborate and allow you actually to collaborate and to trust each other as a self-organized cross-functional group. So with this being said, the next question is, how do you find these team values? And we usually do with our customers a team value exercise where we pick a sets of values and we ask all the people to kind of vet on them and look on those that are important to them, pick the ones that are important or prioritize them. Anybody can veto one of the agreements if they don't agree with it. And this is part of our way of starting up a team, because these are things that you need to set up quite early if you want to have a functional micro society in such of a team. And of course, this is something that a Scrum Master can do or an Agile coach can do, whether internal or external, but it's something that we find absolutely necessary when starting a team. So a few years back, when we were starting our software development team, we discussed a few of these team agreements, and I'd like to give you some more background about them. We didn't invent these agreements. Some of them are actually taken from the core protocols, which is an amazing set of rules that you can learn and apply up to a certain extent if you want to. Those are researched, psychological, and tested basically rules that you can apply in such a micro society. But let's look at a few of them. So we have here, the first one is more positive feedback. This came from a need of the team that they were informed fairly quickly about when things didn't go wrong, because we were doing a lot of reviews, we were looking at design, we were looking at how the code was written, how the tests were written, and all these things. But they also found, of course, very useful to get positive feedback. And so it was very important to put this and have it as a rule. So let's give positive feedback when positive feedback is needed. When you finish something, okay, perfect, great, that's cool. When you put something in production, great, it's awesome. Whenever you achieved something, basically, it's a good opportunity for positive feedback, and it turned out to be quite useful for everybody involved in the team. Immediately clarify a task you don't understand. This is something that I noticed often with especially developers, but not only. People tend to get a task and they don't fully understand it, and then they don't clarify it, but they waste time trying to figure out what precisely it is about. Sometimes they need to write some code and get some feedback on the code, and then they realize that they are not quite implementing what it was supposed to do, and so on. So it's important I found it important, and the team found this, agreed that it was important to have a rule for, clarify a task you don't understand immediately, because in this way we don't waste time with dead ends. And if you don't understand it immediately, perhaps we need to actually refine it a bit more and figure out, perhaps we haven't figured out precisely what we need to do. The third one actually comes from core protocols. It's a very powerful one. Commit to engage when present. This is one thing that I found really works well with the rule of 2 feet from open space, but let me take this separately. So commit to engage when present. I don't know if you've ever been in a meeting, you probably have been in a meeting where you are discussing something and your colleagues are on mobile phones or doing something else. And it's always a bit weird to do that. And I'm always wondering, okay, so if you are here and you don't find this interesting, then why are you here? And nothing stops you from leaving. But when, let's agree, and we agreed, the team was perfectly fine with that. Whenever we are somewhere, let's be there fully. And let's try, instead of, fidgeting with our phones and stuff like that, let's try to get very productive meetings. So if we get to some place together, let's have a very clear goal. Let's work together to fix the goal and then leave as quickly as we can. And that's where the rule of 2 feet comes in. The rule of 2 feet is something that is used in the open space conferences. And the fundamental idea in a conference is that you want to learn as much as possible. And this style of conference has sessions happening simultaneously in different places. And the law of 2 feet says that if at any point you are not learning or not teaching anything, then use your 2 feet and move somewhere else. And so it's often, I know it sounds weird, but if you are in a meeting that you cannot contribute to, it doesn't bring you any value, then you should feel free to use your 2 feet and move away from there and without anybody asking you anything. And this is a kind of very open environment where you know that you have this option. I have applied this also with teams from large companies, and they found it very liberating to see that, oh, so engagement present, and then if there's nothing useful, don't be there. That it's so great. We are finally treated as adults and not as children who need to be somewhere absolutely and listen to something that happens. And of course, you need to understand, or even as a programmer or a tester, that there are some situations in which perhaps things don't sound so interesting to you, but they are actually useful for you. But it's something that you personally should understand. And I've noticed that often after proposing this rule and the teams adopting it, they ended up actually having very good meetings where everybody was involved, and people rarely left because there was always something interesting happening. So it kind of has the opposite effect of what you might expect of people completely leaving meetings all the time. Acknowledge the other person's perspective. This is the fourth one. We tend to be opinionated in software development and in the way we build software and in the way we write code, and there's not necessarily a problem with that, but we also need to find better ways to argue for our position, because you have something useful to share always, but the question is, can you share this in such a way that the other person can actually understand what you are saying? And so one of the common patterns that we saw in interactions was that somebody was saying, we should do things this way, and somebody else was, no, I believe we need to do it this way. It's not a nice way of arguing. What you should do is at least acknowledge, at least say, okay, so I'm hearing you, this is what you are saying. This is why I believe it might not be such a good idea. Let me tell you perhaps my idea, which perhaps is better. And at least in this way, you can argue in such a way that allows understanding and allows growing knowledge inside the team, which is fundamentally what we want to have in a software development team, growing knowledge, especially in an agile team. Now, I realize now that there is actually another way of dealing with this, which is called stillmanning. There's a argument technique that's called strawman, when if you are against a certain argument, you often tend to present the weakest form of the opposing argument. It's called strawmanning. It's a very common technique used by politicians and everybody who is arguing. The reverse of it, if you want to actually argue in a very positive way, is called stillmanning. And it's fundamentally, even if you don't agree with a certain position of somebody else from the team, instead of strawmanning it, instead of presenting the weakest form of the argument, you start by presenting the strongest form of its argument. So you start by saying, okay, so this is what you are saying, A, B, C, and present the strongest form, present the argument, perhaps even in a better way, in a stronger way than they would present it. And then this might actually lead to very interesting and much better debates inside your team. But it's not something that I've experienced with software development teams, but it would be something really interesting to do. The fifth one is prepare before meetings, objective and agenda. This is something that we have always done in Mozaic Works. This has been a rule from the very beginning. It's something that you absolutely must do. We don't want to have long meetings that end up nowhere and the result is just let's have another meeting. No, what we need to do is a clear objective, a clear agenda. And an objective is not discuss about things. It's not, it's about deciding something, planning something, building something together. Often in software development, it's quite easy to have an objective and an agenda because your objective is to build something together. Maybe you want to build a paper design or a white paper design for a more complex problem, or maybe you want to write some code together and figure out how to deal with some complex problems. Or maybe you want to build your sprint plan together or refine the stories together and so on. But nonetheless, this is a fundamental rule that spares a lot of time, a lot of endless, useless conversations in meetings. We need to have an objective, we need to have an agenda. Sometimes the agenda is implicit because it's something that we have been doing for a few years for a certain type of meeting. We know precisely what to do. Rarely, or more rarely, you have an agenda that needs to be designed by the facilitator. And then it's a more complex endeavor. The sixth one is don't start talking while someone else is talking. I think this should be obvious. However, I have to admit I'm also one of the people who often violated this rule, and I needed a reminder to do that. Perhaps it comes from a good place because I have things to share and I want to jump into the conversation and say things and so on, but it's not nice for the other people who are part of the conversation. So I've been practicing to not do that, and of course when I'm coaching teams I'm extra careful not to do that, and I still know it's something that I'm doing wrong from time to time. So I try to remember this rule, but it also applies to many other teams, and I think it's more prevalent with kind of the Latin spirit, where we kind of get excited and we want to jump into conversations and so on, which is really nice, but if you are doing it over a beer or a wine or something like this. But if you are in a more official, let's say, context, you want to be able to hear everybody. You want to allow everyone to say what they want to say and to give them the time to formulate what they are trying to say. So you need to be patient, listen, do this more. And it's something that I've been, as I say, I've been practicing, and I invite you to practice as well if you ever find yourself starting talking while somebody else is talking. Another thing that happens related to this rule is that when you have a longer meeting, you often start to have people discussing in their own corners, and it gets a bit annoying because it means they are not paying attention with the rest of the group. And so in this situation, as a facilitator, it's probably better to take a break. Even if you have this rule, perhaps people are tired or they need to do something else, and then take a quick break and so on. The seventh one, encourage a colleague if you feel she needs it. We have seen this from time to time as part of a really functional and effective Scrum or XP team. One thing that's very important is to feel very confident in the environment and to feel free to come into the office in the morning and say, look, today I'm not feeling so well, or today, my mind is going places and I cannot focus as I usually focus on my tasks and on my code, and perhaps I need some help. And this is something that it's hard to build. It's hard to get up to this point of trust where people would feel confident, to come into a place of work and say to their colleagues, today my mind is, it's not as I'm used to. In order to get there, because this is a great place to be in. It's a place where people are trusting each other, and if they are trusting each other, they can build on that trust. They know each other's strengths and weaknesses, and they can take advantage of each other's strengths and compensate for each other's weaknesses. And it's a really great place, and they can basically raise each other as a team and grow together. And this is something that you want to achieve if you're a Scrum Master or an Agile coach. But the first step to getting there is to allow everybody, or to give everybody in the team the chance to look at their colleagues and say, oh, perhaps you look like you need encouragement. Perhaps, you hear somebody in the room saying, oh, my tests don't work. I don't know what's going on here. Something's really weird, and so on. And then some encouragement can always help. And it's very useful to go there and maybe sit next to your colleague or ask them, okay, can I bring you some tea? Or come with me and let's grab a coffee. It will ease your mind. Or say, I know you can do it. That depends a lot, of course, on your colleague and on what they prefer, what they respond to as encouragement. But it's really a great place to be, and it's a first step towards growing as a team that trusts each other and can grow too. And the final one, the eighth one, positive attitude towards each client and customer. This is something that is very useful to remember, because whenever you are in an agile team, you should be very customer focused, very user focused. But there are situations when users are annoying, because let's say you design a feature, you think about it, you invest a lot of effort into it, you put it out there, and people start using it, and they are using it in completely different ways than you would like them, and you don't understand why they are not using it like you would expect. And this can be frustrating, of course, and it's okay to vent your frustrations from time to time. But what it's not okay is to keep blaming users. So it's okay to come, vent your frustrations, get rid of your irritation and annoyance with what's going on, and then start thinking positively. So start thinking about, okay, they are using this feature in this different way. How can we find out why? Because this is a great learning opportunity, and this will give us information on how to do things better in the future, or even perhaps on new features or improvements that you hadn't thought about before. So this is a great opportunity for learning, and this is something that you should that I advise you to try. So that's what we meant with positive attitude towards each client and customer. Okay, so this has been it. These are not all the team agreements that we made, but I thought it would be interesting to see this list that Rebecca Worsbrook has been sharing in multiple talks in the past years, because we've sent it to her. She was very interested in checklists and in these types of agreements, and we had a lot of checklists and we had these agreements, and they are very, very interesting, I think. So this is it. This has been a discussion about the team agreements that Rebecca Worsbrook has been sharing for the past few years in various conferences, the last time in the QConfest conference. I really like these agreements. This is not a complete list of what we have been doing, but I thought it would be interesting to give some background information on why we were using them and how we got to them, so that perhaps you can get more value out of them, rather than just a simple list of things that are there as rules. So remember, if you want to have an effective, self-organized, cross-functional team, you want to have diversity in the team. With diversity, there also comes the usually comes the need for some rules that define the interactions in this micro society. And the best people to come up with these rules are the people who are in the team. This is not something that you should impose. There are many lists of rules that you can use, but these are a few that you see how we got to them, and they got refined in time. So even if you start from a very small list of rules that are perhaps not so clear, you refine them in time, you add more during your retrospectives, you clarify the existing ones, and so on. And that's in a sense how you evolve this society, this microcosmos, this micro society, the team, in the direction of a functional, effective team. So this has been it. I hope you found this interesting. This is not a video that we usually do, but I thought it was a good opportunity to delve into these issues a bit more. If you find this interesting, please let us know. Perhaps we can do some more videos like this. And until next time, remember to think, design, and work smart.